So once again, before we start today, I'd just like to have another short word of prayer. Let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, thank you once again that we can come together on your holy Sabbath day to worship you and to study your word and to spend time together. Lord, I especially ask that you be with us in this time, that we may not only just see what I personally and my family's been doing on the other side of the world, but we all may gain a closer relationship with you and a desire to serve you as well. I ask that you be with this time. Give me the words to speak, that this time that you may speak through me. I thank you and we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Seems like this might not be working. All right, it looks like it is working. So here we see just a simple map of the world. Many countries around the world. And when we look at the map, we can ask a question. Why do we even do mission work? There's lots of work here in Thief River itself. We have many empty pews. Why do we even go to a different country? Let's open our Bibles to Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1, and here we read a verse that Paul wrote about his time. In Colossians chapter 1 and verse 23, it says, "If you continue in faith, grounded and settled, and be not moved away from the hope of the gospel, which ye have heard, and which was preached to every creature which is under heaven, whereof I, Paul, am a minister." So Paul is saying the then known world, every person heard the gospel in his generation. I would like to look at one quote from Desire of Ages that talks about this itself. Desire of Ages is page 633 and the third paragraph. 633 and the third paragraph, it says this. "In the prophecy of Jerusalem's destruction, Christ said, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come." That's a verse that we're all familiar with. But then she goes on. "This prophecy will again be fulfilled. The abounding iniquity of that day finds its counterpart in this generation. So with the prediction in regard to the preaching of the gospel. Before the fall of Jerusalem, Paul, writing by the Holy Spirit, declared that the gospel is preached to every creature which is under heaven. And so now, before the coming of the Son of Man, the everlasting gospel is to be preached to every nation and kindred and tongue and people." And I will leave the rest of the paragraph we won't read now. But here is saying, so in Paul's day, the gospel was preached not just to every nation, but to every creature, every single person. And in the end, once again, we have that same work. Here we see, on the previous map, you can see a little bit right where Nepal is at, where I've been, right between India and China. It says every nation, every kindred, every tongue, and every people. To give a little bit of perspective, here we think, okay, every tongue, every language, well, you just teach in English and you got the whole U.S. But it's a little bit more than that. Here we have the country of Nepal. It's about 30,000 square miles smaller than the state of Minnesota. Very diverse country from plains where it's very hot, up into the Himalayas. But in that country, how many languages do you think there are? Anybody want to take a guess? 20? Anybody else? Well, across the whole country, almost the language, the national language Nepali is almost universally understood, but there's a lot of the different people groups have their own languages as well. So, according to the national census that was just taken a couple years ago, they say about 123 languages. But that, when we really look at it, I was looking at one news article from then, and they were saying that one particular people group was maybe counted as like a single language, and they have like 23 languages. And when I just was asking one of my friends, that close friend, that and they're from that people group, one of the sub people groups, and they're saying, no, it's not 23, it's more like 56 to 60 of just that one people group. So how many languages is it? We don't know exactly. Maybe it's getting close to 200 languages. And if we say every tongue and every people, then because sometimes in these official censuses, they have multiple different people groups that have similar languages, and they're just counting them as dialects, but they're different, distinct people groups. So when we say every tongue and every language, think the size of the state of Minnesota, you have less than the size of the state of Minnesota. You have maybe 200 different people groups that you're dealing with. The job that we have as Christians, and specifically as Seventh-day Adventists, is not just to reach one city here, one city there, one country here, one country there, but it's to reach every single person within every single country. Because God is a loving God. He will not, before the close of probation, he wants to give every single person a fair chance to decide for or against him. God has given us a job, like in Paul's day, to preach the gospel to every single person. But it gets a little bit more than that. Let's go to 1 Corinthians, and we'll look at a few things here that gives a background to what kinds of work sometimes that God wants us to do that we may not think about at first. 1 Corinthians chapter 14. We have a lot of stuff about the gift of tongues in here, but I want to look at one verse in the middle of this. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 21. It says this: In the law it is written, with men of other tongues and other lips, or in the Nepali it says, with men of other tongues and foreign lips, will I speak unto this people, and yet for all that will they not hear me, saith the Lord. So it's saying here that God, to try to reach people, he will do everything that is possible to reach somebody. And sometimes to do that, he will bring somebody from a different country and bring them to teach the people, and still they won't hear. And when he has done everything possible, only then will he give up. Or not, we won't say that he will never give up until the end. But he will do everything possible, and one of those is to bring somebody that speaks a foreign language, bring them, teach them that language, and have them try to reach somebody. I want to look at a couple other things in this chapter as well. If we look at verse 22, right after what we read already, it says, wherefore tongues are for a sign, not to them that believe, but to them that believe not. But prophesying serveth not for them that believe not, but for them which believe. Well, we all, as Adventists, we studied about the gift of tongues. We know it's not like these different Pentecostal churches. We know it's actual real languages. Like on the day of Pentecost, supernaturally people were able to speak different languages. And I don't claim that I have the gift of tongues, but there's some things in here, in this chapter, when we look at it, there's some things about, we could say tongues or about languages that I think we sometimes overlook. Here it is saying, okay, it's to evangelize others, but when you look at this chapter, there's actually a use of the gift of tongues in church. A use of tongues or of languages in church. Let's go to verses 12 and 13, and then it will be clear what I'm meaning. It says in verse 12, even so ye, for as much as ye are zealous of spiritual gifts, seek that ye may excel to the edifying of the church. So it's to excel to the edifying of the church. In verse 13, wherefore, so it's having to do with the previous verse, with verse 12. Let him that speaketh in an unknown tongue pray that he may interpret. And as I've learned or mastered another language, I've understood in a deeper way also being able to speak a language and being able to translate a language are two different things. To be able to translate and translate accurately, you have to master a language. You cannot just know a little bit of friendly conversation. If you only have that kind of language skills, that is not enough to translate. Because you have to be able to accurately convey what is being said. Especially when we get into Bible and spirit of prophecy, that you have complex sentences, complex thoughts, you have to be able to convey that thought without losing the inspired meaning of those things. So here in this verse, Paul is saying, if you know a language, don't be satisfied with just knowing a little bit. If you know a language, master that language so that you can translate stuff from your own language into that language or translate materials from that language back into your own language. So if you know a language where there's a lot of material, it could be translating that material into somebody else's language to edify the church there. Or if you are in that situation where there's not much in your language, learn a language that has a lot of material so you can translate it to benefit the church in your own language. So here in this chapter, where we're talking about a supernatural gift of tongues also, here is something that shows the importance of translation and translation of materials for God's church to ground them in the truth. And because of that, because of the importance of having materials, one of the things that, especially over the last 4.5 years since I was in the U.S. last, I have helped a bit with translation work as well. First of all, I was doing more of you could say a more minor role, and I was checking the translation according to English, seeing if it's accurate or not, and suggesting corrections. And I've ended up doing more and more, and so that's actually one of the more main things that I've done. So some of the books that we've actually done, this one is actually Great Controversy. So when I first went to Nepal, the one on the right, this was already finished. So rather than finishing the whole book, because it takes so long, once it got part finished, the last section, this was already published. Then I got to help in editing the translation and then proofreading and stuff on these other two books as well. So this is the first one, so we go through the Protestant Reformation, and then when you have Adventist history, we had a second volume, and then we have the last volume. So in this process also, we had a bit of a challenge because the Nepali alphabet is also quite complex. And the traditional way that has been used for what had been used for years for typing and printing and stuff was a font that it's basically you're just using the English letters, numbers, and symbols and just displaying them as Nepali. So in that situation, when maybe you have a period is shown as one character and an exclamation mark is shown a different character. Computer program thinks it can split the word right between the period and exclamation mark. So you would have to check every single line to see if a word is split across lines or not. And it was not really ideal. You couldn't put anything on the internet or not. So the newer thing is Unicode. So basically every character is a Nepali character, and the computer recognizes that. And so this one that had been published before, I got the complex job of converting that, which it's quite complex, converting that from the other system to Unicode. And I actually had to develop a couple fonts as well, because those of you that are a little, I guess Russ would understand a little bit more techie things. Some of these other fonts that actually work better, to make some of the ligatures display properly, you have to use some certain joiner characters that do not work in InDesign and other professional publishing software. So basically, in the end, the only way was to alter a font to make my own custom font. So that was some that I did working on these. And then this is Steps to Christ. Before I was in the US last time, I already converted over to Unicode. We put it online. But when I was in the last 4.5 years, before republishing it, we proofread it and updated spellings and grammar and stuff in it as well. And then in this one, I was able to help with another ministry that I've been helping with some as well. This is Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings. And so I didn't translate it, but I helped some in getting them set up and with font issues and various things. This is one of our current projects, Desire of Ages. So actually the cover there, you might not recognize it, but this is actually the Sea of Galilee. The people that were designing it really wanted a picture from Israel where Jesus would have actually walked and taught. So this is, it's a work in progress. There's another ministry that really wanted to print it quickly, and so the first 30 chapters were printed. They were not fully edited. It was translated and then initial editing, so there's still some work left on it. But the first initial 30 chapters have been published, and then the rest is in the works as well. And in addition to that, we're also working on one health book that has been out for a while in Nepali, and we're updating it and making some corrections on that as well. So that's some of the work that we have been doing. Another thing that actually may be of more use to you all is something that we did recently. So the General Conference Publishing Department had us help translate these tracts. It's a work in progress. It has not been released yet. The Nepali ones have been all completed and formatted. We're all ready to go, so we're going to be printing them a little bit sooner. But there is a website called Sharing Hope that is in the works, and it will be released sometime. I'm not sure exactly when the release goal is, but they have different tracts. So we had 6 tracts targeting Hindus, 6 tracts targeting Buddhists. They will have tracts for Muslims, Jewish, secular backgrounds as well, and in all different languages all around the world. So you will be able to go to this website. If you know any immigrants or anybody that speaks a different language, you will be able to download and print a tract for free that is targeting their religious background in their language. So it will be a real tool. When this comes out, it will be a real tool for those in the US that are dealing with different immigrants. You may have one person from one country one day, meet somebody from a different country a different day. Even without learning their language, you will be able to download a tract right for them in their language. So this is one of them. You have English up here and the Nepali right here. So this is one thing that we just did in the last few months. Another thing I've been involved in is, so I've kind of been helping 2 ministries a little bit. So this, the name that they have is Jivit Bachan. It means a living word. And so they have a YouTube channel as well. They have videos on there. They have a regular Zoom services on Sabbath and on Tuesdays for those that don't have churches. So those that are in areas that don't have churches, they can still attend services online. So they're especially using technology to meet people. But another thing that we've done is, which I was overseeing it for a while, is developing an app with different type of video, audio, and written materials in the Nepali language. So some of the apps that are out there, maybe you'll have, it will have it for many different languages, but the interface is still English, so you have to kind of wade through an English interface to get to the material for your own language. This is pure Nepali. And so what it found as they've continued with this, it actually started getting a bit of interest from other countries as well. Nepali people that have gone from Nepal to work in different countries, they have then contacted them and they've been studying the Bible with different people as well. Sometimes they've had people working in foreign countries that have attended services on their Zoom church service as well. And they're actually working on updating this app, so what you'll see is the live version here, but they're actually updating and improving it as well. And I haven't been involved in the development on that right now, but still I'm maintaining some of the content. I've been helping with it. And we also have, from the app, we have like certain notifications that we send out for like, for when there's meetings, and like for Friday evening when it's sunset, I send a notification out. That has grown from, I think we were under 100 when we started. I was just looking I think it was this morning, what has it gotten up to? 351 people are receiving notifications. And that's not everybody that has the app. Because some people, if you haven't used it for a week, you won't get the notification. Because the cell phone kind of puts it into a deep sleep. So this is like 351 people that are actively using this app. And I think a large percentage of those are not even Adventists. So here's a little bit, just a few snapshots of what we have in it. So you have some featured things at the top. Then you have different, like basically shortcuts to different parts of it. When you come down here, we actually have a contact form. If you click on this, you can actually fill out this contact form and send a message. And so we've actually had a number of people that it's not any Adventists. We know it's somebody like working in different countries or something, they send a message. And so we don't really know how many people it's reaching, but it's reaching more than we think. And go back, so we have audiobook section. You can see at the bottom there's these different tabs. So there you can get audiobook section, and it's here. And so this is Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings, Christ's Object Lessons, Great Controversy, and Steps of Christ are all audio here. And you can download it.
आशीषको डाँडाबाट उपदेश
There's a little bit of
अध्याय 1 डाँडामा
Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings, chapter 1.
येशू बेथलेहेममा जन्मनु भन्दा.
And then if you go back up at the top, there's the audio Bible. So the audio New Testament was available, and then they've recorded, this ministry has recorded the whole Old Testament. So,
दोस्रो पत्रुस अध्याय 1
now people can listen to the
येशू
entire Bible.
ख्रीष्टको दास र प्रेरित सिमोन पत्रुसबाट हाम्रा परमेश्वर र मुक्तिदाता येशू ख्रीष्टको धार्मिकतामा हाम्रो जस्तै अनमोल विश्वास प्राप्त गर्नेहरूलाई परमेश्वरको र येशू.
So then we also have, there's different videos. And also here's the Sabbath school section. So we actually have the Nepali Sabbath school lesson all in the app. So if you don't get the book in time, you can still have it available. So that it's been growing the usage of the Sabbath school lesson as well. And that's been kind of a entering wedge sometimes for Adventist people to get it on their phones, and then they get the other materials as well, because it's a kind of a convenient thing to have a Sabbath lesson on there. Then the video section. So you might recognize some of these videos right there. Okay, let me go back actually. I think I skipped ahead. All right. You might recognize some of those pictures. So those are, a lot of you are familiar with the GraceLink videos for children that have been put out. So some of these have been translated into Nepali. So it's not just for the adults, there's something for children as well in here. So there's just a couple of the recent ones that's come out in the last couple of weeks. Then we have all the written material. So up at the top, this is a prophecy magazine that's been printed also, but then we put in a mobile-friendly format so people can read about different Bible prophecies as well. Then we have all these different books that are available on there. So like this is Great Controversy Volume 1. And just showing some of the features on it as well. Then we've got a few different short articles in here as well. So these are different articles. So this is about tongues, about repentance, and like State of the Dead, different tracks, short tracks that we have also in there. Then here, this is, you may be familiar with the Amazing Facts historical Bible lessons. So this is the Polar translation for those, where you have like multiple choice question and answer also. So you can read it, and then you can fill out the answer, and it'll actually save it on your phone. You can go back and look at it later. So then if you back out of this, then we have a second set of Bible lessons at the bottom, 30 lessons that have been out even longer in Nepali. And these you can also use a few little clip art and graphics in there as well. And you can fill out the answers to the questions. And then they will be saved. And then if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, on the real paper lessons, you have a place to like sign your name to like make sign a decision, basically, like a lot of lesson series have. Here we kind of set up the same type of thing. You type your name, and then you press that button, and it will save your name and the date that you signed it on. And so it's basically like a permanent signature almost. So these are just some of the things that we have in this app that have helped with some as well. So here's one other thing. So the different things that we do, it's not always necessarily exactly preaching or translation that's always important. There may be other things. It may be helping people in a personal way as well. So this is actually my wife's brother-in-law when he was in the hospital. It was kind of a very sudden event. He went to work, nice and strong construction worker. Went to work in the morning. At lunch, just soon after lunch, he started feeling bad, came home. In the evening, went into the hospital. Guy that was totally fine in the morning, he had complete kidney failure, was transferred from an Adventist hospital to a bigger hospital that has more dialysis equipment and more kidney specialized hospital. After 1 week in the ICU, he passed away. And it never even found out for sure what it was. I think some of it was partly spiritualistic, probably. But just to keep his oxygen level up in his blood, they just had to keep on adding more and more oxygen, and finally he was intubated and died in a few hours later. It was kind of a traumatic time for the whole family. I mean, it was totally unexpected. 3 children. And the hospital that I brought him to was actually a little bit about a half hour away from where we were living. So it was closer to their home. And so I was actually, I had maybe only spoken a couple words to him. Didn't really have a personal relationship, but still, I probably spent more time in the hospital. I definitely spent more time in the hospital during that week than I did at home. And there, you have to have at least 1 or 2 people in the hospital all the time, because even though it's the ICU, they're going to bring a little written list of what medications you need, and you have to go down to the pharmacy and get it and bring it back quickly so they can use the medications when they need to. So you have to have, if one person has to leave for a little bit, you have to have a backup there. So at least 1 or 2 people in the hospital all the time, sleeping there in the waiting room. And it was, in a way, I mean, it was hard on the family, but in a way, God has used it also. Because my sister-in-law, she actually, my wife was basically about the first one in her family to become a Christian. And others, most of them are Christian now. But his wife, my sister-in-law, she had interest in Christianity, but because of him, she hadn't ever started coming to church or really come across the line at all. So about a year after he passed away, she started coming to church. And she's been coming regularly. Another thing about that time also is interesting. Sometimes what seems like the ideal thing for us is not always God's plan. Because where we were at, we weren't really, it didn't seem like it was like we were doing any good. It was a very small church. We went there to help the small church, but they weren't really interested in change, you could say, it seemed like. And finally, all the effort we put into it, and in the end, when one of the main people there went off and got married with a Hindu, it made us realize we aren't really doing any good. And we need to move on to a different place, we felt. And church leadership in the denomination also totally understood that. They had put a lot of effort into that place as well, and they hadn't had progress. And so we were looking around. We found this one place that really seemed ideal. We wanted to be a little bit more in a country environment. We were thinking about buying this one place. And it was, you could grow things nice. It was really what we would have liked. And the little piece of property that we had, that we just put as an investment because the land prices were going up, and we could sell it for a little bit more than we bought it for, and it'd be easy to buy something else. So it was a nice place. It seemed like we should be able to sell it. We just couldn't sell it. And to be able to move to buy the place that we wanted to, we would have to sell the land that we had. And it seemed like we should be able to sell it. We weren't able to. And finally we decided, okay, we aren't doing so much good. Let's move closer to where my sister-in-law is. Now her husband's has passed away. She can use some more help. And really we started to see that if we weren't there for somebody, to have somebody there to go to church with her initially, it would be hard for her to get up the bravery to go to church on her own. And so we decided to move too close to where she was. And looking back on that, it's not as much of a country environment as we were wanting at first. But because of that, God has used us there to be able to reach her and be able to bring her to Christ. At that time, before I show the next picture, when her husband was in the hospital, it's not like the hospitals here where you can run up a bill and pay it later. If you don't pay it then, you don't keep your person in the hospital. So money was fast running out, having to have a whole big grocery bag of medications a couple times a day that are having to take a whole bunch of money that's going that, and for the ICU costs, dialysis costs, and various different things. He basically had multiple organ failure. He had a complete kidney failure, fluid in his lungs, fluid around his liver, fluid around his heart. And it was, I think, how the doctor described it is if he was in the U.S. with really sophisticated medical treatment, he would still have only a maybe 30-40% chance of survival. So there was still a chance of saving him, but finances were a big issue. So I put up a GoFundMe campaign, and God really blessed more than I expected. A lot of people, some people really, you could say, donate sacrificially. And then I had a goal of $10,000 on it. And one person said, we'll see how much other people donate, and then I'll meet the goal. I'll pay the rest. And right in that, we had already raised a bit, and then he passed away. It was kind of where we weren't totally expecting it right then also. So I had just taken my turn at the hospital. He had just been intubated. I was actually took some medication in there. I was probably the last one that saw him before he actually passed away. And then, he was intubated, so kind of a little bit more stable. We were thinking I went home, thought I was going to sleep within about an hour. Once he got home, got the call that he passed away. And so then, now the funds that we've raised, now they're not going to be used to keep him alive because he's already gone. So I had to told everybody that donated, and with everybody's permission, then those funds changed the purpose to be able to give my sister-in-law a means of support also. So a couple things that were needed is she was just they were in a tin shack, you could say, bamboo and tin shack, but the bamboos are rotting off a bit, so it wasn't going to last for real long, needed a more permanent house, and also needed a means of support. So when we moved over there, it took a little bit of time because the land was in her husband's name. Maybe relatives might want to take it, so I had to kind of keep everything quiet until the land was securely in her name and she was free to build. But because of that money, it had to really economize also, and a lot of the villagers helped carry supplies and stuff for free. But here is her house that was when it was under construction. All the materials we had to carry from a little ways away because it couldn't get a vehicle up close to it. Here's from the top, nearing completion. You can see a little bit down back here. This is the old two-room house. And then here's pouring the roof on it. And so not just the house, but we also, we had some experience with a clothing shop before. We started a clothing shop with her. And then, so she would have a little bit of means of support also. It's taken some time to build up a little bit more business, but she's actually running it while we're not there. So it's helped for her also, but then as we were there, there's actually no Adventist church right here. It's either about a 20-minute, like maybe a 20-minute walk and then a 20-minute bus ride one way, or a half-hour motorcycle ride the other way, which you don't have bus route, the complete route to church that other way. So we're kind of in between two different churches, and we would often, when we go to the one way on the bike, I'd usually take 2 trips every Sabbath. A couple of people start walking, and then I take one, and then come back and pick up the others. And so at first it was just her, and her daughter, I guess I should connect this part of the story also. Her daughter, a few years ago, spent some time at my in-laws. And in that time there, she got to spend, have morning and evening worships in the family, going to church also, and she really started to, it started to change her a bit, where when she went back home, she didn't want to participate in the Hindu worships or anything. She would pray and everything, but because of her father's influence, she got where she wasn't really interested at all. And it took a few months of just my sister-in-law going to church with us, and finally her daughter also started to go. So now it's been for a number of months that we all have been the 2 of them have been regularly going. Her youngest son, that didn't really pay attention to his studies at all, was just kind of an energetic little boy, able to get him in one Adventist orphanage. So he has had an Adventist influence there that has really been good for him. Her oldest son we still need to pray for. He doesn't really have any interest in Christianity, just in his video games. But here is me, of course, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my wife, my younger of my 2 brother-in-laws, his older son, his wife, his younger son, and this is my sister-in-law's daughter. And we have a little bit of story about these 2 people that I want to share in a little bit. But this was Sabbath afternoon after going to church. So sometimes we may have plans that may seem ideal, may seem like it would be God's will, but sometimes God has a different plan, like he did for us, to put us somewhere else where he could reach people there. And I hope that sometime we can even start a church, have some other believers there, and start a church there near where we live. Amen. Here's another thing that recently happened. So I got to participate in this program. One thing that I feel is important for all of us is whatever ministry work we are doing ourselves, we also need to support the organized church. So recently, we had this program that was put on by the Adventist Theological Society from Andrews in collaboration with the Himalayan section of Seventh-day Adventists and Gospel Outreach. And so it was March 22nd to 25, and they asked me to help a bit with it. So it ended up being quite a bit that I got to help with it. One of the handouts, I had to translate that, and then end up more other people translating. I dealt with more with other areas like preparing everybody's name cards, formatting, preparing all the schedule, and printing different materials, running registration, all different things. And this is just one of the band. This is a banner that I actually designed. You can see some of the audience had 100 person quota, but we ended up having a few people more than that. Here's a group photo at the end, and a picture of all the different organizers or people that were involved with it. And this, along with this, it was something that was a blessing to me also, was I was actually asked to translate. Now, I've translated a little bit verbal. I've done most of the written translation. I've done some verbal translation in some places when, like, maybe nobody else is available. But here, when you have plenty of people that can translate in front of 100 people and you're asked to translate, it shows that I think that's really where God wants any missionary to, the place that He wants them to reach. To be able to speak the language. I still have accent, but to speak it in a way that people will understand you. And that people can still want you to translate in front of a large audience. I think part of the reason also was because Americans that aren't used to being there, they talk fast like an American and they don't know how to talk quietly. Yes?
Can you give us an example, like a common greeting?
There's like 3 different ones, basically. So it depends if you're, the common one is we have namaste, but then if you want to be a little bit more respectful, it could be namaskar, or if you're with Christians, it could be Jai Messiah. So it depends who you're talking to, you use a different greeting. But yeah, I think also it's because of the complexness of somebody else that's their native language is English, and they're not used to simplifying. And so I think they partly had me in there because they would have a little troubles understanding what he's saying. So anyway, I don't know if you may have heard, and this is Roy Gain from Andrews University. So this photo was actually taken, I talked about these 2 people before. It's taken in front of my sister-in-law's house. This is finished. And these 2 individuals, they're from Idaho, Dennis and Judy Scandunas. And they have, he's been a painter for many years, and what he'll usually do is he'll paint in the summer, and then in the winter, he'll travel to different countries and help out different mission organizations or different missionaries, painting and whatever they can do. So they say that they're missionary to the missionaries. He's now 70, she's 75. And so they came over this last fall. And really when they were there, I did something that you would say is pretty stupid. But sometimes God can give us stupid ideas for a reason. This is my normal transportation, 150cc motorcycle. You can see from the side. Not real big, kind of medium-sized motorcycle for there. And one day, they had sponsored one student in Spicer University in India, or Adventist University. And they wanted to go see his parents in Kathmandu. And we're building our house then also. I might need to be back, it was Friday, might need to be back in the afternoon. Taking a taxi would be kind of expensive from there. So we thought about just taking the bus, and then we thought of an idea that's maybe a little bit quicker to do it. I would put one of them on the bus, with their cell phone, sharing their live location to me so I could then take one on the bike, get them there first, and then I could come back and see on my cell phone where they're at, and I could just go and stop the bus there and get them off. Well, that was a pretty normal idea. And then when we're getting down about halfway to the bus park, he asked me, well, can we just all three go on the motorcycle? Well, it's not legal to have three people on a motorcycle there. We do it sometimes where we know the police aren't going to see us, but it's not legal. He has been a motorcycler all his life. He has ridden his motorcycle from the tip of South America all the way up to Alaska. They've been married, I think it was 32 years. She has only been on his motorcycle 3 times because she's scared of motorcycles. I think she had a relative that died in a motorcycle accident. So now she's also willing to do it. That is somebody that's only been on her husband's motorcycle 3 times in 32 years. And it's a little bit overloading my motorcycle. It's not necessarily going to be the best on it. Under other circumstances, I would just say no. And if my wife was there, she wouldn't have let me do it either. She was still at home, and we were down the road a little ways. And I should have said no in all other circumstances, but I just couldn't bring myself to say no. And I thought, well, there's this other route at the bus park. There's going to be police there. You can have one person walk across the bus park to where we're out of sight, and then you can take this back route. It's paved for a little bit more than half the way, and then we have this dirt uphill, downhill. And when we get to the edge of town, if I can have somebody else, a friend, come and take one person on their motorcycle, well, then we can make it work. And so I started making phone calls. The first guy that I called, that's usually the most available to help things like that, he was busy. Or I think, actually, he didn't answer the phone. I called another guy. He's out in town, he's busy, he can't help. So I called the other guy that I used to live at his place, nice committed church member, and he is a very busy businessman. You almost never find him at home, and he's almost never available. But I called him, he was at home, and he was available. And so, his house is just near where we'd come into Kathmandu on this back route, and so we decided we were going to do it. And so we started going, and it wasn't too bad. Once we started hitting dirt, I realized, this is stupid what I've done. Every little bump is making him uncomfortable. Once we go uphill, that's pretty good. Going down, again, the weight from behind me is just pressing on me, having to really brace myself against the handlebars, and it was, you could see, a little bit of a miserable ride. But we got there. We had a great little conversation there at home, and then we went across town to where we were supposed to meet those people. And then I realized why I had that stupid idea, or why he had the stupid idea, and why I couldn't bring myself to say no. The people that we were going to meet, the son has gone through Spicer University. He's doing work with schools. He's raised up some schools in India. He's done a bit of work, but he hasn't really witnessed to his parents. And so they don't really know so much. If the other people that I have called, if they had gone with me, they could have shared a little bit, but they wouldn't have been able to share a lot. And if we had just taken the bus and got into town and took a taxi, well, a taxi driver, he's definitely not going to witness to anybody. But because of the person that we went with, he is a very outgoing, very talkative person that if you go to visit somebody's house, you don't really want to expect to leave soon, because he'll just make friends with anybody and talk for a while. And he was able to share some of his testimony in a way that I would not have been able to do, and none of the other people that I called would have been able to do. And he was able to share something in that home that even the son in that family had not shared. Because we got a stupid idea to put a 70 and 75-year-old American on the back of a little motorcycle and go on a rough mountain road. Sometimes God gives us some stupid ideas. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. And today I want to look at verse 25. And it says this: because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. And when we read this verse, we often think, okay, God, he's never foolish, so his you could say that his ideas that are the least wise are still wiser than men. We think of it that way. But sometimes God's plans may actually look really foolish. But if it's God's plan, he's got a reason. Whatever God may show that he wants you or I to do, no matter how foolish it may be, let's commit ourselves to doing it. It may be something here in the U.S. It may be in a different country. But wherever we are, let's remember that God has a work for each of us. It may not be what we expect, but even our life is a witness to those around us. And God has something that he wants to do through you and I. Let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you once again for your word and the things that you have shown us here. You want us to reach every person on this globe. The job is so big that it looks impossible. But Lord, sometimes you have a plan to work through us in ways that we would not expect. I ask that you lead and guide in each of us, each of our lives. Show us what we should do on a daily basis. And be with the work also around the world and in Nepal, I pray. We thank you and I ask that you be with each one of us until we meet again. We ask all this in Jesus' name.